My parents refused to visit me in the hospital, but threw a party for my sister. So I recovered alone, and they'll never see my door again. I'm 24, and I've always felt invisible in my family. Growing up, it was like I existed in the background of every conversation, every photo, every celebration. My parents, well, they adored my younger sister. She got the trophies, the vacations, the endless praise. Me? I got the sighs, the lectures, the quiet judgment that never had a clear reason. I learned early that being the scapegoat wasn't just a role. It was my identity. This all came to a head a few weeks ago when I ended up in the hospital. I'd been having these sharp chest pains for days, thinking it was stress or maybe just my anxiety acting up again. But then, one night, the pain hit me like a freight train, and I collapsed in my apartment. The ambulance ride felt surreal. Lights flashing, sirens screaming, strangers hovering over me while I clutched my chest. And through it all, my mind kept drifting to one thought. Will my parents even come? When I finally got admitted, hooked up to monitors and IVs, I texted them. I'm in the hospital. It's serious. Please come. And then I waited. Hours passed. Nurses shuffled in and out. Doctors gave updates, but no familiar faces. No one knocking on my door, no voices calling my name. My sister? She called once, sounding more annoyed than concerned, asking if I was overreacting. And my parents? Silent. Blank. As if I had become a story they didn't want to read. Lying there, staring at the pale hospital ceiling, I felt this mix of fear, confusion, and a sharp, bitter sting of betrayal. Every memory of being overlooked, every insult disguised as jokes, every small dismissal from my childhood, they all came rushing back. It was the cruelest confirmation. Even now, in my moment of vulnerability, I was invisible to the people who were supposed to protect me. And yet, somewhere under that hurt, a small fire sparked. A thought whispered in the dark. Maybe I don't need them at all. Looking back, the hospital incident wasn't an isolated event. It was just the latest, sharpest cut in a lifetime of being overlooked. My parents' favoritism wasn't always obvious at first glance. It was subtle, woven into everyday life so seamlessly that I questioned myself constantly. Birthdays, for instance. My sister would get a themed party, decorations, a mountain of gifts. Me, a card with a generic happy birthday scribbled at the last minute. I learned to swallow the disappointment, smile, say thanks, and tuck the hurt away. Even at school, the pattern was the same. My sister's accomplishments were celebrated loudly. Honor rolls, awards, even casual compliments from relatives. My achievements, barely acknowledged. That's nice, I guess, my mom would mutter, never making eye contact. And when I faltered, oh, how my failures were magnified. Why can't you be more like your sister? My dad would say, casual as if it were fact. I remember sitting at the kitchen table after one report card, tracing the edge of my notebook with my finger, wishing I could vanish. The emotional manipulation was constant, too. Passive-aggressive comments disguised as concern. You really shouldn't make such a big deal about this. Or, if you just tried harder, and guilt-tripping. Oh, they were masters of it. We've done so much for you, you should appreciate it, they'd say whenever I protested even slightly. The effect was subtle at first, then corrosive. I began to internalize the idea that I was inherently inadequate, that I didn't deserve attention or care. Little things built the pattern. Being left out of family photos, my sister being the one asked to help at events, my voice barely heard at the dinner table. Those small, almost imperceptible slights became my normal. My expectation until the hospital came and tore the Band-Aid off, and lying there, abandoned in a sterile hospital room, the weight of all those years hit me. This wasn't just about today. It was the cumulative effect of decades of neglect and favoritism, finally manifesting in the cruelest possible way. I realized with a sinking feeling that the people who were supposed to show up for me would not. The night it all hit, I thought it was just another bad panic attack. But then the pain wouldn't stop. My chest felt like it was being squeezed by an invisible fist. My vision blurred, and every breath became a struggle. I remember gripping the edge of my couch, heart pounding so hard it felt like it could shatter my ribs. My phone was on the table, but calling 911 felt surreal, as if dialing could somehow snap me out of the nightmare I was in. And when the paramedics finally arrived, their hurried voices and the blaring sirens made everything feel both urgent and terrifying. Once I was wheeled into the hospital, hooked up to monitors and IVs, I kept glancing at the door, imagining my parents rushing in. "They'll be here soon, right?" I told myself, trying to hold on to hope. I even called them, "Mom, Dad, I'm in the ER, it's serious. Please come." But the calls went unanswered. No return texts, no one showing up. I sat there, trembling under the hospital gown, trying to understand how someone could be so absent when it mattered most. Meanwhile, a nurse walked in with a clipboard, murmuring instructions. "Try to relax. You're in good hands." Her words were kind but hollow in comparison to the family I longed for. My mind drifted to my sister. She'd just had a recital, her big moment. I had seen the party planning texts, the decorations being ordered, the invites sent. The contrast made the emptiness in my chest twist sharper. I couldn't help thinking about the years of favoritism, the trophies, the praise, the constant comparisons, and now, even here, in my most vulnerable state, it was happening again. My sister was celebrated. I was invisible. My fear, my pain, my humanity, it didn't seem to register in the people I loved most, and in that sterile, fluorescent-lit room, surrounded by machines and strangers, I realized something harsh. This wasn't just bad timing. This was consistent. This was who they were, and I was utterly alone. By the second day in the hospital, the reality hit me like a punch I hadn't seen coming. My parents weren't coming. Not today, not tomorrow, maybe not ever. Every unanswered call, every ignored text, every passing hour reinforced the same bitter truth. I wasn't important enough. I remember sitting in that hospital bed, staring at the stark white walls and feeling a loneliness so heavy it pressed down on my chest harder than the illness itself. The nurses tried to fill the gap. One brought me a warm blanket and offered gentle words. "We've got you," she said, her voice soft but professional. And some friends checked in with texts or short visits, their awkward concern a faint comfort. But even the kindest gestures couldn't replace the people who were supposed to be there, the ones who were meant to drop everything for me. Every smile felt like a reminder that I had been abandoned. Meanwhile, I couldn't stop thinking about my sister. Somewhere in our family home, balloons were going up, music was playing, cupcakes were being arranged, photos would be taken, laughter would fill rooms I'd never enter. And here I was, surrounded by sterile machines, IV tubes, and the unyielding scent of antiseptic. The juxtaposition made my chest ache in a new way, not from illness, but from betrayal. I replayed memories from my childhood, little instances that suddenly made sense, my birthdays overlooked, my achievements dismissed, the constant comparisons to my sister. It wasn't a one-time thing. This hospital moment was just a magnified reflection of a lifetime of neglect and favoritism. Anger, grief, and disbelief swirled inside me. I felt both childish for hoping and bitterly adult for realizing the truth. The people who should have been my safety net had chosen her over me, yet again. And in that moment, lying alone, I understood something chilling. This wasn't just about missing a hospital visit, it was about patterns, about who I had been to them all along. And as I stared at the ceiling, my tears mingling with frustration, I realized the night would be long, and utterly, painfully, silent. As I lay in that hospital bed, staring at the ceiling tiles, my mind refused to stay in the present. It kept drifting back to every little moment that had slowly taught me I was invisible in my own family. I remembered the science fair in middle school. My project had taken weeks, I'd stayed up late meticulously crafting every detail, and when I finally presented it, my parents barely glanced at it. Meanwhile, my sister had won first prize the year before, and they'd taken a dozen pictures of her holding the trophy. "You did well, I guess," my dad muttered, walking off before I could even smile. "High school brought its own bruises." I'd worked hard on essays, exams, even extracurricular awards. My sister's accomplishments were plastered on the fridge, pinned to the walls, celebrated at dinner. Mine disappeared into the background, barely acknowledged. Birthdays, holidays, family gatherings, she always had the spotlight. I learned to speak quietly, to fade into the corner, to make sure my successes didn't disrupt the story they preferred to tell about her. There were bigger moments, too. My graduation, my first job, the first time I fell in love. My parents attended, but it was as if they were merely fulfilling an obligation. The excitement in their eyes never reached me. They seemed to measure my worth against hers at every turn. And each time I asked myself quietly, am I just too much? Or not enough? Do I even deserve their attention? All of these memories converged in that hospital room. The years of neglect, the subtle jabs, the comparisons, they were a pattern I couldn't ignore any longer. A fire began to burn in my chest, a raw mix of pain, anger, and clarity. I realized I had spent too long questioning myself, wondering if I'd done something wrong. And in that moment, amidst the beeping monitors and antiseptic smell, I told myself quietly but firmly, enough is enough. I thought I had hit the peak of betrayal, lying alone in that hospital bed, but then came the moment that shattered whatever fragile hope I still clung to. My phone buzzed, a message from a friend who knew my situation. Hey, saw your parents posting photos from your sister's party. They look really happy. I froze, staring at the screen, the words blurring before my eyes. I opened social media, half dreading what I'd see. There they were, my parents, smiling in photos, raising glasses, laughing, arranging balloons, cheering my sister as if she were the only person in the world who mattered. There was cake, decorations, a live band even. And me? I was in a hospital room, fighting to breathe without anyone noticing, without anyone caring. My chest, already tender from illness, tightened in anger and disbelief. I couldn't understand how someone could celebrate so carelessly while their child was lying in pain. I called my mom, voice trembling. "Why are you at her party?" "I'm in the hospital." Her response was cold, almost dismissive. "We can't cancel everything for you." Don't overreact. The shock hit me in waves. All those subtle, small betrayals. They weren't accidents. They were a pattern. They had always put her first, and somehow I had convinced myself this time would be different. The years of longing for approval, for simple care, suddenly felt like a lifetime wasted. And then, amidst the hurt and fury, clarity began to form. I didn't need their approval. I didn't need their attention. I couldn't rely on them. Not ever. They had shown their true priorities, loud and clear. Somewhere deep inside me, a cold, steady resolve started to grow. If they wouldn't be there when I needed them most, I would survive without them. I would recover, I would thrive, and I would never let them dictate my worth again. But that night, as the sound of faint laughter and music floated through my phone's screen, I realized just how alone I truly was, and that feeling hit harder than any pain I'd felt before. Just when I thought I could start pulling myself together, my body betrayed me again. A sudden spike in my vitals sent alarms blaring through the hospital ward. Nurses rushed in, voices urgent, machines beeping frantically. My chest felt like it was being crushed from the inside, and panic clawed at me with sharp nails. I gripped the sheets, gasping, feeling the weight of my own vulnerability pressing down harder than ever. I reached for my phone automatically, hoping, just hoping, to see a missed call from my parents. Nothing. The screen was blank. My hands shook as I tried again. Still nothing. I couldn't stop the tears that spilled down my cheeks, mingling with the sweat of fear and pain. Why did I ever think they cared? I whispered hoarsely, the question echoing in my skull. My voice sounded small, insignificant, almost as if even the words themselves were invisible. The room felt colder than before, sterile and suffocating. Nurses flitted in and out, doing their jobs professionally, but none of them were my family. None of them were supposed to be here. I felt like a child lost in the dark, abandoned in a world that should have protected me. Every beep of the monitor, every rustle of paper, Every clipped, "We'll get you through this" from a stranger was a reminder that I was utterly, completely alone. I thought of my sister, the party, the laughter, the balloons, the cake, and then the crushing realization their joy had been prioritized over my life. Every neglected birthday, every uncelebrated achievement, every cold comment, every casual dismissal, it all converged in this one unbearable moment. The betrayal didn't just sting, it burned. I curled into myself, trying to quiet the storm inside. My chest tightened, not from illness alone, but from despair, from the bitter clarity that this family would never be the ones to fight for me. And in that silence, broken only by machines, I swore quietly, fiercely, I would survive this, alone, because they never would. After that night, something inside me shifted. The despair was still there, simmering, but so was a quiet determination I hadn't felt in years. I realized I had two choices: let the absence of my parents define me, or take control of my own recovery. And for the first time, I chose myself. The days that followed were slow, painful, and stubbornly beautiful. I learned to celebrate the smallest victories. Walking from my bed to the bathroom without help, eating a meal without choking on fear or frustration, even managing a laugh when a nurse told a silly joke. Each step, each tiny accomplishment felt like a declaration. I could do this. I was doing this. And I didn't need anyone else to validate it. I began to rely on myself in ways I never had. I monitored my own recovery, researched nutrition and exercises, reminded myself of my progress when doubts crept in. Friends who visited brought warmth, but I no longer needed constant reassurance. For the first time, I felt the edges of freedom, the quiet thrill of being untethered from people who had never been tethered to me. At night, lying in the same stark hospital room that had felt so isolating weeks before, I reflected on the absence of my parents. The sting was still there, yes, but it had transformed into clarity. Their neglect had forced me to look inward, to discover strength I hadn't realized I possessed. And I began to understand something powerful. The love I had been seeking from them wasn't gone. It was just waiting for me to claim it myself. Even now, my voice still trembles when I think of how alone I had been, but there's pride too. Pride in surviving. Pride in taking charge of my own healing. And as I sat up, stretching carefully, feeling my body regain some of its lost energy, I realized that this journey was no longer about who had abandoned me. It was about who I was becoming, and for the first time in a long time, I smiled. Quietly, stubbornly, and fiercely, and it wasn't for them. It was for me. By the time I was fully out of the hospital, the anger that had been simmering for weeks had crystallized into something sharper, focused, deliberate. I knew I couldn't go back to being invisible, the quiet, overlooked child. Something inside me demanded boundaries. I started imagining the life I wanted, attending my own achievements without guilt, celebrating milestones without them, living in a way that didn't require their approval. And most importantly, I knew what I wouldn't do anymore. I wouldn't attend their family events. I wouldn't bend to their expectations. They would no longer dictate my worth. I spent hours imagining confrontations in my head. I pictured standing firm, voice steady, while they tried to guilt me into attending a party or a holiday dinner. No, I would say, simple and unyielding. I'm done being invisible. You'll never take me for granted again. The thought alone sent a thrill of empowerment through me, mingled with the sharp sting of long-held betrayal. I even pictured them realizing finally that I had my own life, a life that didn't revolve around their whims. I also made practical plans. I would limit contact, block unnecessary calls, and create a personal space they couldn't invade. I started envisioning moments of poetic justice, not in cruelty but in quiet, undeniable independence. I would thrive while they scrambled to notice me, and in that scramble, I would finally have the satisfaction of standing on my own terms. Every plan, every imagined confrontation made me feel more solid, more in control. For the first time, my anger wasn't just pain, it was fuel. And as I scribbled my thoughts into a notebook, tracing out boundaries and possible responses, I realized something. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming myself. And yet, as empowering as it felt, a small, tense part of me still wondered, how would they react when they finally realized I wasn't theirs to manipulate anymore? Months passed, and I emerged from that hospital chapter not just healed, but transformed. My body was stronger, yes, but it was the mental and emotional shift that mattered most. I no longer measured my worth by their approval or absence. Every step I took, walking into my new job, tackling projects I'd once doubted myself on, finally pursuing classes I'd postponed for their convenience, felt like a declaration. I existed on my own terms now. I threw myself into work and studies with a focus I had never known, fueled by the bitterness of past neglect and the clarity of newfound independence. Friends who had supported me celebrated my achievements, but even their praise paled in comparison to the quiet pride I felt swelling inside myself. I was finally living for me, not for anyone else, not even them. Then came the subtle but unmistakable signs that my parents had noticed my absence. A text left unread, a phone call ignored, a hesitant attempt at checking in. They had missed so many milestones, so many small victories, that the distance between us had become a silent wall. And now, when they reached out, I didn't rush to respond. I didn't bend. Their worry or surprise wasn't my responsibility anymore. It was a reflection of their own choices. There was a strange, almost poetic justice in their inability to insert themselves back into my life. The very people who had refused to stand by me in my most vulnerable moments were now powerless to touch the independent, thriving person I had become. Every smile I gave myself, every small success, every confident stride was a quiet rebellion against years of neglect. And in the mirror, one evening, brushing my hair back and noticing the spark of determination in my own eyes, I realized I didn't need anyone's validation, not theirs, not anyone's. I had survived, I had thrived, and I had finally found the worth that had been denied to me for so long. For the first time, I felt entirely, unapologetically, myself. It didn't take long for the inevitable to happen. My parents finally noticed that I wasn't waiting for them anymore. The texts started first, short, hesitant, almost clinical. "We're sorry we weren't there. Can we visit?" My chest tightened as I read each one, a cocktail of old hurt and quiet satisfaction bubbling inside me. Then came the calls, rings that went unanswered for hours, then voicemail messages full of the same rehearsed concern. Even a hesitant, "We miss you," arrived like a fragile apology stitched together out of guilt. I sat quietly, phone in hand, for the first time feeling the power of choice. I could respond or not. And when I finally did, my words were measured, calm, and unyielding. "I've recovered. I'm proud of my life, and I don't need your presence to validate it. I'm setting boundaries. Visits or texts beyond that are not welcome." There was no shouting, no anger, just clarity. A line drawn in the sand. For the first time, I saw the contrast between who I had become and who they were. Their selfishness, their long history of neglect, their prioritization of my sister over me. It all stood in sharp relief against my new confidence, my independence, my hard-won strength. And the satisfaction wasn't cruel. It was quiet, almost meditative. They had finally realized what they had lost. But by then, it didn't matter. I thought about all the times I had waited for their attention, longed for their approval, and doubted myself because of their favoritism. And now, as I sat in my apartment, looking at the life I had built, healthy, strong, and unapologetically mine, I felt a profound sense of justice. Not revenge in the dramatic sense, but a life lived fully and independently, untethered from those who had failed me. And in that moment, a small, private smile tugged at my lips. I had survived the worst of them, and I was finally untouchable, in the most powerful and peaceful way imaginable. Lying in that hospital bed weeks ago, I never imagined I'd get here. Strong, independent, and unshakably sure of my own worth. The sterile walls, the lonely nights, the deafening absence of the people who were supposed to love me, They all seemed insurmountable at the time. But looking back now, I see it differently. That hospital room wasn't just a place of pain. It was the crucible that forced me to discover my resilience, my strength, my ability to stand on my own 2 feet. I recovered alone, yes, but in doing so, I finally saw my own worth. Every small victory in the months after, the first walk unassisted, the laughter with friends, the quiet pride in personal accomplishments, was proof that I didn't need validation from the people who had ignored me. My body healed, but my spirit healed even more. I stopped measuring myself against my sister's accomplishments, against their expectations, against their whims. I became my own benchmark, and the truth is, my parents will never see my door again. The golden child illusion, the hierarchy of favoritism, the emotional games, they don't exist in my life anymore. They're outside, spectators to a life I built for myself, a life they can't touch, can't control, can't claim. And that's more satisfying than any dramatic confrontation or revenge could ever be. I've learned that self-respect isn't about making them pay, it's about reclaiming your own power. It's about standing tall in the face of neglect and betrayal and knowing that your value isn't determined by anyone else. I've learned that the people who abandon you are not the arbiters of your life. They are merely a part of your story, not the authors. So now, I live freely, unapologetically, fully myself. I laugh when I want. I achieve for myself. I celebrate myself, and I do it without waiting for anyone else to approve. And for the first time, I feel what it really means to be loved by the person who matters most, me.